Hello and welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm David Patton, and we're delighted to be at David Horowitz's Restoration Weekend at the beautiful Breakers Hotel. And joining us now, we're happy to welcome Mr. Charles Payne, contributor for the Fox Business Network and, of course, also Fox News Channel. Good to have you with us.
Oh, thank you very much.
So we've been hearing a lot about run-ups on Wall Street, equity valuations just going through the roof. And what's interesting is a lot of them have to do with kind of the techie stocks that had fallen out of favor a little bit. Snapchat now, a valuation over $3 billion. Google, Facebook, the tech stuff. Do you think we're headed for another tech bubble at this point, Charles?
I don't. We're not at that point where Pets.com went public and had a greater market cap than Toys R Us, or people were putting together business plans on a napkin on a Wednesday and going IPO by Friday. Yeah. So we're not at that level. The interesting thing about a Snapchat, for instance, the technology is moving so quickly. You take a Facebook, for instance. The Instagram play there is probably going to be as valuable as the Facebook play, particularly in terms of valuation. As younger people get off Facebook, they go to Instagram. I think these guys are trying to stay a step ahead of the game. By the same token, this week alone, we saw Cisco come out with terrible earnings, and the stock took a punishing price. So the older school technology, I think, is giving way to some of the newer things. And we've got cloud computing. We've got a whole lot of things that really are starting to come to fruition, and so I don't see where there's a whole lot of companies out there that we can't connect the dots. Either they are profitable now, or we can see them being profitable. There are not a lot of pipe dreams out there, but certainly you can hear the B word, the bubble word, is certainly popping up everywhere.
Well, one of the things that's fueling the pie in the sky mentality a little bit, because there is a little bit of it on the street, is of course QE. Just tossing money into the market. Do you anticipate there's going to be a point where the really savvy people on Wall Street start to take a step back and they go, being on the gravy train has been great, but it can't go on forever?
Here's the thing. I have a stock market research firm, and this has been one of my best years ever. But it's been a great stretch for me, and none of my stock recommendations have anything to do with quantitative easing. Now, for me, what's been the most amazing aspect of this market run that we don't talk enough about, to be quite frank with you, is global prosperity. The average American still thinks of the world as sort of a backwards, place where we're dropping food out of airplanes. You say, hey, do you know Baku, Azerbaijan? Have you ever seen the skyline of Panama City? You ever think about Luanda, Angola? People would be shocked. And the great news is that these large American corporations are selling their products there. In the last quarter, Harley Davidson, their sales in America up 1%. In Latin America, 39%. They love our refrigerators and our cars and our motorcycles. So that plays a role that does not get enough press in my mind. Apple gets 66% of its revenue outside of America. So I think that's part of the story that's not being told. Valuations aren't in that area where we're trading 25, 30, 35 times forward earnings. So having said that, I think some of the savvier people on Wall Street might be bracing themselves, but let's face it, it's been a terrible year for savvy Wall Streeters. Hedge funds are up a collective 9%, 10%. The market's up 24%. Here's the irony of it all. It's not the little guy who's late to the party. It's the smart guys. And almost every day you pick up a newspaper, some hedge fund guy's going to jail for cheating. Are you kidding me? In this market, the last 4 years, you had to cheat? So I don't know how savvy Wall Street is. Anyway, I think they've overthought themselves. I think we might be giving them too much credit. And to your point, I think a lot of them have gotten lazy. And maybe they are watching things like QE instead of doing good old-fashioned stock market research. So I don't know that I would necessarily take my cue from these guys anymore.
So talking about being too smart, so, too big to fail and moral hazard. We used to talk about that a lot, especially after the meltdown. Yeah. And it's really been almost swept under the rug. Do you see any indication that we are any less vulnerable to a huge meltdown or a crash or a problem like that today than, say, we were in September of 2000?
No, I think that problem's gotten worse, particularly with the banks. A lot of people don't know, March of 2009, FASB, who are in charge of our accounting standards, they passed a new accounting rule. By the way, that was the bottom of the market. And they allowed these banks to price their assets at a make-believe price, if you will. So let's just say, for instance, you've got a watch. Your father gave you a watch. You like it a lot. You don't know what it's worth. And you go outside and you want to sell it. and no one buys it from you. Doesn't mean it's worthless. So that's what the banks told the accounting board. Hey, we've got these assets. There's no price on them. We can't put them on the books at zero. They are worth something. So the accounting board said, all right, well, you guys make it up. Wow. Guess what? Almost overnight, banks became profitable. How'd that happen? Almost overnight, the stock market reversed and went straight up. We haven't hardly looked back since then. So the opaqueness of banks, we still don't know what they're holding. We do know that it's toxic. We do know that's part of what the Fed, you mentioned the Fed. Here's one of the things that I find with the Fed. They're pumping out this $85 billion. It's not getting to Main Street. Half of it goes to these banks to buy their toxic junk, and the other half goes to the federal government to overspend. It's not getting to Main Street.
Sure.
People aren't getting that money yet.
Sure.
So, yes, that part of the equation is the most dangerous part. A $3.5, $4 trillion balance sheet for the Fed that, by the way, is getting nothing. That cycle, that virtuous cycle that Ben Bernanke has been desperate for, hasn't started. We talk about the housing recovery. That's not Main Street. Those are Chinese investors. I mean, it's so, that point I'm more afraid of right now than individual stocks necessarily being overvalued. I'm more afraid of the banking circumstances and that gigantic bubble on the Fed's balance sheet.
President Obama said that he's going to allow the insurance companies to renew these policies that were getting just canceled in droves. Yeah. And now the insurance companies are kind of up in arms. They're saying, hey, President Obama, you're asking us to re-enroll 5 million people who have been or in the process of being canceled in the next 6 weeks when you've had 6 weeks now and you've only been able to sign up, 25,000 people onto a website for health care. So it's extremely short turnaround. The insurance commissioner for Washington State just balked. He said, look, this isn't fair. We're not going to even try to impose this. Right. Is there a concern in your quarter from the people you're talking with that we are dangerously close now to that so-called death spiral where because of the new configuration of who's in these insurance pools, the premium cost shoots way high because it doesn't have enough young, healthy people in it. And then, of course, they have to raise the prices, and then that makes it that much harder for people to stay with those premiums, and they drop those policies. How close are we?
We're close. I find one of the many ironies, for lack of a less kind word like lies, is, we were told that this whole thing from the very beginning was to help 30 million people who don't have any health insurance. All of a sudden, we get a congressman who stands up in the middle of these hearings, Mike Doyle, and says, my 33-year-old self-employed son is going to have not cheaper premiums, but will pay less because he's going to be subsidized by taxpayers. Wait a minute, let me get this straight. We're subsidizing 33-year-old men, self-employed men, the son of a congressman. As it turns out, 400%, if you have 400% above poverty,
right,
you get subsidized. Now they're talking about making that 500%. So someone making 50 grand a year, taxpayers helping to pay their health insurance. So we were told that the whole group of us, because it was so many millions, we'd be able to force the insurance companies, the power of millions to lower those premiums. The premiums are going sky high. Then, of course, we were told, well, you had a substandard policy. How is that not exactly the same argument that the left made about Wall Street? That they suckered people into buying homes they can't afford. Well, at least they cajoled us into it. The president is making people buy health insurance plans that they didn't want, they can't afford, and it's going to wreck them. It's going to wreck them. So we're going to have fewer people with health insurance, certainly over the next several months, than with health insurance. And the people who are taking the plans are going to Medicaid. I mean, it is an unmitigated disaster. The whole thing has been driven by ego and ideology. And if someone doesn't step in somehow, if one of the sycophants in the inner circle doesn't say, Mr. President, you have to scratch this. Even if you just scrap it for a year, keep your dream alive, it's an unmitigated disaster.
It almost sounds like you're saying, hey, it's already too late to save this from the death spiral. It's happening right in front of our eyes.
It was dead on arrival. It was a death spiral upon arrival, and it only got worse through the egotistical part that we're going to have it ready on October 1st. We're not going to have true bidding for this. We won't have 15 or 20 firms go out for this because it's going to take too long. It's going to take months to go through all of these evaluations. What names do we have in the system? What's this CGI? Give them the job. It was dead on arrival. It was not put together right in the first place. It wasn't a bipartisan thing. It was all about doing something historic, and it is going to be historic, but for all the wrong reasons.
Well, last question for you. We remember not so long ago when everybody was talking about bush fatigue. And
You know, those posters miss me yet? I think they start popping up again.
well, what do you think? Do you think that politically, culturally, even on Wall Street, which supported President Obama in many ways, do you think that we could be looking at Obama fatigue at this point?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, first of all, every second-term president becomes a lame duck, some sooner than others. And I think the president, really, this will be his Waterloo, Obamacare, and the misrepresentations to the public, the promises that you would keep your health insurance even when they knew that you would not. The promises that you would keep your doctor even when they knew that you would not. The spying on our friends and allies, the spying on Americans, this stuff is weighty. This stuff makes a lot of people say, golly, you know, it's just not the person I thought it would be. It's just not the administration that I thought it would be. And yeah, so the fatigue factor, but with the fatigue factor comes something else. It comes a certain apathy. And I think there's a dark cloud of apathy that's holding back the entire country. And so we're in that already. We're in that stage already. And hopefully we can find a way to propel ourselves out of it. But we've hit that fatigue point already, I think.
Hope and change seems to have given way to a little bit of despair and regression, if any.
You know what? Here's the thing. Hope is a good thing if your back is to the wall, you have no alternatives, and you have no belief system. But people who have a strong belief system, who have a good game plan, and who are determined, you don't need hope.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Charles Payne, thanks for joining
Thanks
us
a lot.
on
I really
Newsmax
appreciate
TV.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.